Guys, everybody, welcome back to the Mending Men from Trauma to Triumph podcast. I am your host, Osher Guerrero. As you know, always call me OG. And I am incredibly excited and privileged to introduce my guest here today, Mr. Justin Sliva. And quick little introduction, Justin. So, Justin's a successful real estate investor specializing in raw vacant land. He's founded several notable companies in the land niche, including Land Mule, Plum Investment Group, and Casual Fridays Media. Justin's uh, has helped in providing quality rural land for customers and has helped and mentored over 475 clients through paid training and joint ventures. He's a legend in the podcasting space. He's got guest appearances in over 35 podcasts, and he's spoken to several events for real estate investors. You can also find his book, Coffee Money Real Estate Investing, on Amazon. And he's the co-host of the Casual Fridays REI podcast with over 465 episodes and has been distributed in over 120 countries. Justin is an entrepreneur. He's a husband. He's a father, and he's just a really cool guy. Justin, I'm pumped to have you here, man. Why don't you give us a little quick introduction from your own words?
Man, OG, I appreciate you having us or having me. This is a little bit different podcast than I'm used to because we're usually talking land, and now we're going to go dove into the personal, kind of the closet, the deep skeletons in the closet. Maybe not skeletons, but those deep thoughts and inner workings of your mind, and kind of creating who I am today from what kind of took place, throughout my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And Justin shared with me over message. He's got a really unique story, and I've spoken with a lot of men and women with trauma, but yours really stood out because it's the first time I've heard a story like yours.
Yeah.
So again, like, it's incredibly unique. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been through, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, man, it's a great. I want to say the story is a tough story, but it ends in it has a decent ending, or a really good ending, probably the best possible outcome you could have. As so many people in today's world have grown up without knowing their fathers or their mothers, they live in a single family household. I grew up not ever meeting my real dad. I was told it was a name, and so I had this figment of my imagination as a kid growing up. But my mom got remarried as soon as she had me to somebody else who was willing to be my dad, but she was adamant that he wasn't. And so that was kind of written in the family Bible. And then she gets divorced from him, gets married again when I'm 5. And that's the guy I called dad. He raised me as a stepfather, and he did an amazing job. I don't want to take anything away from him, but I wasn't his son. I could always tell that, and always knew that, even though he tried to make it equal, there were certain things that popped out through that life. And so fast forward a little bit, I'm an entrepreneur. So, I like to answer questions that aren't really there. I like to dig. And so my grandmother, who's my mom's mom, and I carry my mom's maiden name. So Sliva is actually my mom's maiden name. And so always having that kind of sitting there, and you go to the doctor and they're asking you who your father is and you don't know. So you have all these things going through your head. My grandma started noticing when I was about 16 that I was up to something, like I was going to figure out who this was. And so she came out and said, "Hey, Justin, we have this letter from your mom in the family Bible. In the event something happens to you, that I can get it to you, and you will know who your father is." And I'm like, "The fuck?" I'm sorry, I don't know if you're PG or not. So I'm like, "Okay, awesome, man, great." So I'm like, "What the fuck?" 16, yeah. My mom has known who this was, and they have his address. Why haven't I been given the opportunity to reach out? I'm writing a letter. Fuck that. You give me the name and the address, I'm sending this letter. So I send the letter, and I'm 16, so I write like a 3-page letter, kind of detailing who I am, who I thought I was as a person at that age. And I get no response. And I'm like, fuck, man. If he only met me, I'm a really good kid. I'm an all-American kid, I have straight A's, I do all this stuff. I'm just a good person. And then no response. And so I'm just wind out of my sails. And so, I'm still what the thing that for me, we're probably going a little bit long, and you'll have questions come back. So I'm going to kind of give you the thought process, give us a base to work from. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, you ask yourself, am I not good enough? Am I not a good kid? I've done everything right. Why isn't this going for me? And so, you have those questions you ask yourself, and you may do it subconsciously. At a kid at 16, you don't really understand. You're like, oh man, what the hell? Do I go bad or do I go good? And so at that point, I was like, I'm just going to keep working on myself, keep going, keep doing my head job, played baseball, raced BMX bikes, was straight A, didn't ever want to hurt anybody. I was always wanting to be liked because I was always having to go from step family to step family. I was always the outsider, it felt like. And so you sit there and you deal with that. Is you're 16, you work at a grocery store and you see a cute girl, you have to ask her about her dad or mom. Hey, where was your dad at when you were born? Because it could be your sister if she has hazel eyes and brown hair and you just felt the connection. And so that sounds silly, but that's the way my mind worked at that time.
Yeah, sure.
So fast forward a year or two later, I'm getting ready to graduate high school. And I'm like, hey, I've got these senior pictures. I look good in them. I'm graduating in the top 10% of my class. I was homecoming, or I was a prom king. I was Mr. whatever high school I was at. So I was like, I'm the all-American kid. Nobody would not want a son like me, right? And that's what I'm thinking. And so I send like 3 or 4 senior pictures and another letter. Well, I get a call
to the same guy,
to the same address.
Same address,
like,
yeah. Okay.
Just send it, baby. Let's go and see what happens. Well, apparently the address was this guy's mother, and the story's gonna get a little weird here in a second. So the guy reaches out, and this is when you could go to the airport and you could have lunch and dinner in the airport, and you could sit. So it's 2000, 99, 2000 ish, and so this guy reaches out and he goes, "Hey, this is Lawrence. My wife got your letter. Yes, I knew your mom at that time. I could be your father." I'm flying in from Colorado Springs to Round Rock, and so I'd like to meet you at DFW. I'm laying over there for a little bit. Let's have dinner. So I go, and I'm amped, right? I'm thinking, oh, this is the guy. This guy comes off. He's similar characteristics. He's dark hair, hazel eyes. I'm like, this is it. I finally found my dad.
Wow.
He says, hey, I started a company when I was younger, and I build clean rooms for computers. So it's done pretty well. We'd like to do a DNA test just to make sure there's nothing, because the way everything's written is written for the oldest son. I have one son. We struggled to have him. Now you come into the picture. I want to make sure that everything's kosher. And I'm like, yeah, man, you're who I've been told my whole life is my dad. The same first name, And so I'm trying to think here. So I said, okay, we do this DNA test. About 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from him. He goes, I need to speak to your mom. I don't know what was said. I know she got off the phone. I'm like, hey, his name is Lawrence. Hey, Lawrence, what's going on, man? He's like, let me talk to your mother. Oh, okay.
You're excited. You're excited.
Dude, I'm so excited.
You're hoping for the best, aren't you?
Yeah. So he talks to her. She gets up, runs to the bedroom, and starts crying. And I'm like, okay, what the fuck's going on here? I was 18 now, so I'm old enough to get something's not right. They hand me the phone back. He goes, don't ever contact us again. I'm not your father. You'll get the DNA test in a couple weeks. So they mailed it to me. So at this point, I'm in denial, right? I'm like, there's no way. This is who I'm told. My mom said he was 100% Czech. She's 75% Czech. So I'm like 90% Czech. My whole image of myself as this Czechoslovakian kid, because my grandparents on my mom's side, or great grandparents, they spoke nothing but Czech. And so I'm like, my identity is wrapped up in this. Like the last name is Sliva. It means plum. And so I know a couple Czech words. And, so I'm like watching my identity shift on this. And I'm like, well, what the hell? So if it's not him, who is it? Or are they lying to me? And so I looked at the letter. They sent the DNA test, and I'm like, oh, this can't be right. They forged it. They just don't want to claim me. This is just what's going on. And so for a couple of years, that's the way I lived, was that, hey, this isn't right. And so my grandmother and my aunt and my mom's sister knew that was just eating me up. Like, what's going on? My mom would not talk to me about this, right? My stepdad did not want to have that conversation in the house, because as far as he saw, he was doing his job as being a great father. Now, there's little things that took place in my childhood that we could dove into later if we need to, but just I wanted you to see kind of the mindset behind this. So I go into like, well, I guess I'm never going to know. She's not going to talk to me about it. So my aunt started picking kind of and said, hey, do you happen to know this? Hey, do you know this guy? And we started uncovering different names that it possibly could be. And my grandmother magically wanted all the grandkids to take a ancestry test and 23andMe test. And so we would see links pop up that might be a second or third cousin, and they would track it down. I'm telling you, my aunt got unreal at her sleuthing skills on the ability to find people using the DNA that you put in Ancestry and other databases.
Yeah.
So we come up with about 3 different names, 3 different people I reached out to, 3 different people that it wasn't it. So I am crushed. Well, the last one we reached out to, the gentleman had died a couple months after I was born with a DUI. A truck driver that was drunk ran into him and crashed. So the family thought I was a late heir trying to come take any lawsuit that was there, trying to rightfully claim. And like we would tell everybody, we don't want anything. I'm just trying to put this puzzle together in my life. Because you really don't know who you are. You assume you know who you are like as a person, but I think we all want to know who that other side of us is. We want to know who that is.
Absolutely.
And so this is always in the back of my head. Is like, I
Mm,
meet a girl, and I said that earlier, I'm working at the grocery store and meet a cute girl. Well, it affected my dating through high school and college.
mm,
How do you go on a date and you don't know who your father is? And I don't want to be, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to accidentally have a kid that comes knocking on my door later in life. So the opportunities to, be a good looking, active, 18, 19-year-old kid, I wouldn't do. Like, I wasn't like, it's like, hey, I dated a girl for a long time. We broke up, moved, then I started dating my wife, and we've been together 22 years. And so my mind doesn't work in the hookup culture. It just doesn't see it
right.
because fuck is it? What if that was my half sister? What
Yeah.
if
Fair.
it,
Yeah.
so you go there or you go, what if I get her pregnant and I'm the guy that he was? And
Right.
my mantra in life is always be who you needed or who you wanted when you were
Yes.
a kid. And so I
Yes.
live
That's
by
so good.
that. I live by that with all my relationships. Like, you having this, if when I started a podcast, I would love for somebody to come on there and willing to share their story. And so it's I live by that mantra and I have always done that. And so, we go through that last one. And so this is like 2000, well, I'm 40, turn 42 next week. So it was like 35 at the time. So 6 years ago.
Mm,
And I find out that's going on. Well, at the same time, we get a ping on Ancestry that I've got a second cousin that's a female in Arkansas. And so I'm like,
Arkansas.
okay, a second cousin or could be an aunt, or a great aunt. And
Yep.
so we're like, okay, well, my aunt looks up the DNA numbers because they have assignments like 798. Well, 798 tells you who it is in that radius of DNA. She gets the username and throws it into another database that anybody that has used that username, it gives you their email that's attached to it on any other platform. And so she takes that, gets an address and a Facebook name. We send that girl a Facebook and she's 21. I was like, there's no way she could be my aunt at 21, right? And
Right.
so I reach out to her. She says, hey, I put it on for my grandmother. You need to talk to my mom. So I'm like, okay, now I've got a grandma. That's it. Could so
Mm,
now we got a second aunt. So we tried this in. So we reach out to her. She says, hey, I've got one brother. He's a half brother. He lives in West Texas, and he has three sons. And I said, give me a name. So we Google the name. We find the three sons. The two younger sons were too young. My mom would have had to hook up with like a 13 and a 12-year-old. So I was like, I don't think
Trying to
she did
avoid
that.
that.
And I'm like, please,
Some things
Lord.
we don't want uncovered.
Yeah, this has been a fucked up journey so far. And I want to stop right there because I want to say something. Like, digging into your parents' closet and finding the skeletons in their closet is tough
Mm,
because they don't want that uncovered. They don't want it.
mm,
They don't want you to know that they were a 19-year-old kid just living life because we
yep.
forget that about our parents. We forget that our parents, and this is something that's just a realization as the last few years for me, is that it was my mom's first time too to be an adult. It was my
Yep.
mom's first time to be a mom. It was my
Mm,
mom's first time to do a lot of this stuff. And we hold our parents in such high regard that we forget that they're human too. They're not the superhuman person because they've told us what to do our whole life. They've tried to guide us, but we forget that they're human too. And that took 40 years for me to get to that point where I wasn't mad about it anymore. I
right.
I
Mm,
probably felt more sorry that I didn't understand it earlier because I was so angry about it growing up.
mm,
And even I didn't act out because of it. I was just, internally I had to eat that. Like just wasn't happy about it. So back to the story, I reach out to we find the one guy, we look him up on Facebook. My wife sees the picture of Clell and goes, Jesus Christ, how did your mom not know that was the guy? And so this is where the story gets even more interesting. She go, my aunt, because we find her. My aunt's poking to my mom like, "Hey, did you know a guy by this name and like when you lived in this town?" And she goes, "Yeah, huh?" She goes, "Do you think that could be Justin's dad?" Possibly. I have a picture of him and my photo album because my mom, as kids, we had these photo albums that lined our bookshelf of her, younger days with her friends. And sure enough, she had a picture of him my whole life sitting in that album because they were friends. They lived in the same apartment complex. They went on a few dates.
yeah.
He got moved. She was down there for work, and he got moved down for work for a month or two, and then moved back to where he was from. And then he met his wife, and they've been married ever since. And my mom went on her way because she was pregnant and
That was it.
moved back to Fort Worth. And
Yep.
So now we're sitting there and I got a name, right? And I'm like, fuck, this is going to be like number 4 or 5 guy that I'm going to walk in and be like, knock, knock, knock. Hey, I'm your son. And I, I don't know if you've ever had to do that or ever had that happen. It is not a fun thing because like if somebody walked into your household right now and said, "Hey, OG, remember that time at Live in Miami, baby?" Well,
Yeah.
surprise.
Drama, chaos.
Yeah.
I'm good. Yeah.
So I'm an empath by nature. Like I look at what it's going to like. So there's an old CIA trick. They talk perspective versus perception. And so I try to look at everybody's perspective, like what it would be. And so I put myself in their shoes and try to work that way around it. And so I'm thinking of his wife, his family, his kids, and I'm thinking, oh shit, well, he was running for a public office at that point, for a small public office in a small town. And I'm like, that's exactly what he needs right now during this. I can't, I'm not going to reach out. I'm not gonna do anything right now. My aunt's like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah. And I remember it was a Saturday night. It was in January. And I was like, yeah. I said, I will tell you when it's time. But we just got off the other one that was dead, and we stirred up all those feelings for that family. I do not want to do this right now. And she's like, oops, already did.
Already did it.
And I go, what? He wants to talk to you. And I'm like, oh no. So I'm sitting there that fright, and I was like, hey man, you know, I want to get to know you, but I need to know that you are my
Yeah, of
dad
course.
first. Like I want to protect you and your family, but I need to really protect me at this point because I've done this too many times, and frankly I don't know that I can do it again.
Yeah. I mean,
And
this
he
is
said,
at
no,
this point,
respect
it's
that.
almost, it's like over half your life, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm 35 at that point.
You're 35 at that point. You've been
36.
doing this since you were
Yeah.
16 or
Yeah. So
starting looking
20.
into this
Yeah.
16, 18. Yeah.
Yeah, so 20 years of going through the search, and right now I'm at the cusp. The
Hmm.
DNA is lining up really close. So I send him an ancestry test. It's like, hey, just do an ancestry test, send it in. When the results come back, we'll talk. So we send that in. Um, he sends it in rush. Ancestry loses his results, and so we're sitting there for like a month waiting. And so I'm on edge, right? I'm just like, oh god. So I said, fuck it, man. I'm going to go to CVS. I'm going to drive down because he lived about an hour from me. I'm going to drive down and just meet him. And we're going to take the test. We'll send it off together, and then we'll know. And I'll at least have a conversation, name and face. So I drove down. We met at Chili's. We did it in the parking lot. Did this swab. We sat down and ate. And it is a small town, and he was a prominent police officer. He'd been there for 20 something years. And so we're sitting down at lunch, and he's in his uniform, and I'm sitting there. And this guy that works with him didn't know he ever had a son, and he's looking at both of us, and he doesn't know how to introduce me. It's just this weird, just kind of cute interaction.
Yeah.
I don't blame him. I wouldn't have known what to say either. Hey, this is maybe my son or not. But he says he introduced me as Justin, and the guy's looking at both of us like, holy shit! Like
He can
I didn't
see
know
it.
you had a son. It was that embracing of a
Wow.
moment. So ancestry comes back. It's 99.99%, that he's my
Fuck.
dad. And yeah. And I'm like, fuck, here we go. And so now, the friends I have that have gone through this, I talk to them and they're like, oh, if I only knew, like if you only knew. Well, and and so that's the mentality. If all I have is this name, if I have this name that I can put my whole piece together, but that's not true. That doesn't happen. It brings more questions. And so
Sure.
the questions are different. They're more pointed because it doesn't like I almost I felt bad because he didn't know. Like I got his side of the story at that point, and he didn't know he had a son. So I wasn't some just derelict kid to him. He just honestly didn't know.
He had
And
no
so
idea.
he and so now I'm having to manage the feeling because I remember I'm an empath, so I'm having to manage the feelings of a man that didn't get to raise his son. And how do you navigate that? Like, who do you talk to about that? Who do you ask? I didn't know. Like, I was lost at that point. And so, you've got the answer to the question that you needed, but at the same time, you're in a frontier that not many people know. And
Hmm.
so he was willing to go all in. Like he was ready to, hey, I'll be daddy, like in that. And so I didn't know if I was ready for that because I had a guy that raised me. I had Greg that raised me, and he's a hell of a dad to me,
Sure.
And so that lies a whole nother conundrum of what life entails for you. Like, what do you do from there?
Hmm.
So so this is we've met. It's been 6 years or 5 years. He was at the birth of my youngest son. He was the first one to the hospital. Um,
Nice.
so our where I had to get, I was like, hey, he's like, hey, because they came on strong, like, hey, they wanted me to every event, they wanted to introduce me to everybody, wanted to go, which was the best possible scenario I could ask for. But I wasn't ready at that point. Like I struggled with that. Like who
Sure.
are y'all? Everybody was super nice. His wife has been amazing through this. And because I interrupted her family, she did the timeline in her head, and so she said she was okay with it because she did the timeline. They weren't together,
Okay.
and so my half sister Jen has been they've been amazing. They've been amazing to our family. They've treated us with nothing but love. But I struggled with that piece. Is like I I'm self sufficient. I'm an adult. I'm like
Oh,
I don't need daddy right now. Like I don't know what I need because the 10-year-old me is crying right now, but the adult's like, wait a second, like you're here now. So
yeah.
what do you do from there?
Oh, that gave me the goosebumps, dude.
Yeah.
That gave me the goosebumps.
So,
Wow.
yeah, man, so that's where we're at. I worked at the conversation. I said, I said, because it was pushing pretty hard and
Mm,
not, it's out of love. It's out of excitement. That's the first time he's had a son. He was trying to get my name added to the registry that he was my dad with the governments and things like that. And I was like, whoa, 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 this is just coming too fast. And I think it upset him a little bit because I was holding, like I found them, but then I was pulling back a little bit. But I was scared. I mean, I don't know you, but I want to. I'm just trying to figure out like what this navigation is through this, and so we he likes to hunt a lot, and he saw a couple pictures of me hunting, so I was like, well, I'll hunt with him every year. Like I'll figure out a way to become friends, and he can tell me his stories and let him teach me stuff, and still have this. And the guarantee I made to him, and we sat down and we had a conversation about it, and this is probably one of the hardest conversations you have because you're talking to your parent, but you're doing it in a way to as, hey, I'm an adult. Let's set some ground rules where we're going to start from and work from there. And so the conversation was, I really want to get to know you, and I really want to look at you as a dad and a father figure, and I respect you, and I appreciate you doing what you've done for me. I don't know if I'm ever going to run to you and be daddy. You're never like I'm never going to run to your arms and be like I need you because I at this point I mean at that time I was I'd made my first couple $1,000,000 and I'm self sufficient. I'm running my own companies. I didn't really I don't want to say I didn't need anybody, but I didn't need a daddy. I don't I
right.
but so what I told him, it was like, hey, I can't ever guarantee that I'm going to run this way, but what I will give you this, and you have my word on this, my kids will never know you not as a grandfather. That's the best I can do right now.
That's huge.
It's yeah, so it's going to get better, but let's start there and work. And we talk a couple times a week now. He works with me in the land business. He runs my tractor. I was going to buy a tractor. I was talking to him about renting it out. He's like, I'll just run it. Just he's a retired police officer, so he's like, my days off when he does some moonlighting, he's like, I'll just go run it for you, and we'll split it. And so he picked out the tractor he wanted with all the implements, and so he runs that, and that kind of we have that relationship and it works well. We do hunt together. He's taking my oldest son to Canada to hunt bear. Me and him went on a bear hunt. We've done coyote hunts, and so best possible scenario that could have happened. But it's
Yeah.
it's been a mind fuck for less lack of better words.
Yeah. Dude, that's heavy, but also, I'm really happy to hear that in the end things have worked out in a positive sense
Yeah,
in the sense that it wasn't a father who abandoned, but more
yeah.
so just simply didn't know. Now, there's a lot to unpack here.
Sorry, I didn't take a breath.
No, you're good. You're good, man. That was you gave me the goosebumps, which is really what matters the most is getting that out there. But a couple of things I want to unpack, and I think one of an important lesson that I took away from what you said, and a lot of people who suffer with trauma, whether it's childhood trauma or adulthood trauma, we tend to kind of hook ourselves on finding an outcome. Like we
Mhm.
set in our minds, like, I need this outcome. And once I get to that outcome, well, then everything is going to make sense and everything
Mhm.
is going to get, quote unquote, better. But then we finally get to that outcome. It's sort of like hitting a dollar figure in your business. You're like, oh, that's going to be everything. And you get there, like,
Yeah.
wait a second, there's another mountain to climb. And trauma is very much the same way. So I thought it was interesting that you finally found him after
Mhm.
what,
20,
20
20
years
plus
more.
years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
20 plus years of looking for him, and a lot of disappointments, you could say,
Mhm.
along the way, right? Or getting your hopes up and then not happening, and then finally getting to that point. And what you used to think was going to give you closure now just opens up a whole new door and a whole new room of questions. So I
Yeah.
think that's really powerful and important for anyone listening with trauma. It's the process of understanding is not a linear path. It's not a
Yeah.
linear journey. It takes time, and you're going to
Hmm.
hit road bumps, and you're going to find answers you're looking for. And sometimes you're going to like them, and sometimes you're not going to like them.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing that we can get from Justin's story here is just because you find the answer to something you were looking for, it doesn't mean that you figured it all out.
Yeah.
And trauma is important because we get trauma brain, and trauma brain has a tendency to tell us one thing, but actually, in reality, something else happens. So I think that was really interesting, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. I have a couple questions about
Okay.
family.
Okay.
Can I go there? All right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you met him.
Okay.
Did you feel anything energetically? You're an empath. Did you feel anything when you met him? Did you feel there was a connection, or was it just like meeting a guy?
No, well, you got to remember there's at that time it's 35 years of not knowing who he was. So there's an anticipation, there's a nervousness. And so I think that all plays into it. Um, I like, when you kissed your wife for the first time and you felt like this magic happened, right? Like they felt like there was love. There
Yeah.
wasn't that instant of hug that was like, oh God, there was a more of a curiosity. Like
Mm.
I'm looking at our hands sitting and it's one thing we both made a comment. We're sitting there, we've got our hands on a table. He's looking at my hands and I'm looking at his and they're like identical. Just the way the vein structure is, the knuckles. And we kind of chuckle. We're
Wow.
like, well, we got the same hands. And that was kind of, so there was a nervousness there because you're two men trying to figure out and you're
Sure.
navigating this thing you don't know. And so was there like this magical moment of like bliss, like when you meet your wife, you go on a first date or, that nervousness? No, there wasn't that, but there was small details that we're both looking at each other's like shape of our head, like the barrel chestedness, you're looking at the physical features and you're looking in the eyes and you're seeing the different colors like yours that are hazel. And so you're picking up details. And I think for me, yearning for that, like wanting to know who that was, I was picking up details and making them so. And I'm
Mm.
sure he was too. But, there wasn't that magic. Like it's like you think, oh my God, it's my dad. Oh, it wasn't that. But there was just the curiosity of this man sitting across from me and wanting to
Mm.
know him and what it was like and who he was. And we started finding like similarities in personal paths and things that we do. And so that was probably the most eye-opening thing is that we both have a server's heart. Like we both want to serve other people. And so you think that's taught, like you think that's just by being around people. But it made me question that was it because of how I was raised, or was it a brain chemistry makeup that was passed down?
Mm.
And
Right.
that's why maybe you see generational police officers, you see generational doctors, or people that have a certain thought process, and we put so much into it as like, well, that's the way they're raised. Maybe it is, but maybe there's a piece of chemical there that flows a certain way.
Yeah. Wow. That's huge. And then I want to go to the other side of the family.
Okay.
And I thought about this because my mom is someone who never met her biological parents. She was
Okay.
adopted in Colombia back in the
Okay.
50s and, you know, had the inclination to go search for the mom,
Uh huh.
but then always felt this guilt. She
Uh
felt
huh.
guilty that if she did, she would somehow be hurting her mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mother who's taken care of her whole life, and so she never pursued it to the point of actually finding out who it
Okay.
was. Um, so I'm curious, how did your mom react to once you knew exactly who it was? How did she react, and was there any resistance there from both your mom and your stepfather?
So yeah, there's this is a we'll go into deeper here, and I'll apologize to them if they listen to this and they have that, but this is just this is my perspective of how that went down. So when we found him out, my mom didn't want me to tell my dad right off the bat, like, and
Mm.
it was creating a rift between us, and I don't like to operate like that. I don't want to operate in the gray. I don't want to operate, and that's why if you listen to our podcast, I'm extremely transparent on everything we do, because I don't want to operate in a way that I have to remember what I told you. Um,
Sure.
and so it's easier for me just to blurt it out and talk too much and then know that's my truth out there or not. So my wife is pregnant with our youngest son. We're at my mom's house and, it's getting pretty heated up. And I'm going to back up a little bit. When I got my ancestry report back, or my 23andMe, and it tells you like you're English and you do those, my mom's come by my house and I say, hey, Mom, I think it's my birthday. And she came by and said, hey, I got this ancestry report. Whoever whoever you dated that's my father, I probably use a different word than dated, but I'll just keep it nice just to be respectful, was so English that he probably had crooked teeth, a little small green sports car, and an affinity for horses and dogs. Like he probably talked like Austin Powers. And she's like, what? And I was like, did you date anybody that was like, righto, cheerio? She turned around and walked out of my house and left.
Wow.
And so I was like, fuck. And I'm sarcastic, and we have a sarcastic friendship. So it wasn't out of the norm of what we do, but it hit a nerve. And so then we found out who it was. She didn't want me to tell my stepdad right away. And so I remember me and my wife being pregnant, we were at my parents' house, and my wife was inside with my grandmother. My grandmother was having she's bipolar, little bit like I call it schizophrenia, bipolar. They tell me it can't be the same, but she had severe depression, manic depression, and schizophrenia. So she's having an episode, and she's calling my wife by a different name. So this is kind of the chaos that's going out. She walks out. She's already on alert. She's high alert. And she's the one that's been helping me with these for these years. And she's not in a healthy mindset right now. Well, she comes out and starts kind of yelling at my mom and me. She's like, y'all two just need to get this over with because I'm tired of dancing around this. And my dad's like, whoa, what's going on? And I said, Mom, this is on you. You're doing this right now. And I said, this shit needs to stop because I don't appreciate being put in the middle of this. And he doesn't know what's going on. He's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So I said, Dad, she's had me lie to you for all these years, or this year where we're trying to figure this out. And I don't appreciate it. You need to talk to your fucking wife about this, and y'all need to figure it out because I'm the kid here. I'm not the adult. And we go in, my mom gets mad at my grandma. She kind of she swings at my mom, but misses and falls down. And so, that was just a real traumatic thing. My wife's pregnant, so super hormonal. My grandma starts yelling at her because she thinks she's somebody else. And so she leaves crying. I leave, worked up. It's just a really bad situation that's happening. So the next day, my stepdad calls me. And I remember because I'm sitting in the chair, I was working from home there. And I'm sitting in the chair, and he calls and he goes, hey, I want to talk about yesterday. That's not like you. You've never talked like to your mother. And I said, well, so there's a lot going on, and I'm being put in the middle of it. I found who my biological father is. She's avoiding the conversation. She doesn't want me talking to you about it. And I don't think it's fair to me. And he goes, okay, well, I thought I was your dad. I thought I'd done a good job. And I said, yeah, but you have, but this isn't about you. This isn't replacing you. This is about me trying to figure out who I am. And one of the things that I told him that it sticks out to me really bad, and I think it caught home to him. But when we were little, he had we had VHS tapes, so we had favorite movies that we'd throw on, and one of his was Field of Dreams. Field of Dreams, the movie is about the guy building the field, and it's build it so they'll come, but it's the dad. Oh, sorry, I'm getting choked up a little bit. So he's playing catch with his dad for the first time. So I'd watch my stepdad cry because he never got to play catch with his real dad because he died so young, and while he was so young. But I was never allowed to cry about that. And I was never allowed to have that emotion. It was like, what are you upset about? It's not the same, And that's how I grew up feeling. Like I wasn't allowed to have the same emotion for not having that father figure. So you go through that, and I explained that to him, and he goes, wow, I didn't ever think of it like that. I said, you've done great. I said, but what y'all didn't realize, he was always very big on everything being equal in his house. So he did a great job at that. And I had a roof over my head. It may not have been the nicest stuff. It may not have been the best of everything, but they did what they could for me. But telling an 8-year-old on Christmas that everything's even, then watching his brothers and sisters go to their other parents and then come home with a car full of toys, and you're not allowed to have anything extra. They're like, well, you got your presents, and so I'm very self-reliant. I don't like gifts just because we don't want to deal with that. But I mean, being at 8, you do that your whole life, like 6 to 18, and every year it happens. And so there's many Christmas days where they left and I'm by myself. We celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve with them so they could go to their other parents. My parents didn't really have Thanksgivings because they were at their other parents. And so my idea for me, my perspective, again, this is not what they told me. This is what I perceived from it. This is how I processed it. I was just in the way. I was the kid that was just, the extra kid, So, well, I got to do some things like go to pawn shops and learn how to negotiate for TVs, or go to what we called the pool hall because my dad liked to drink. And I'm the kid on his weekend off. He wanted to go play pool and have some drinks. And so we'd go to the pool hall, and I'd play video games and pool, and while he drank and smoked and, did his thing. All beknownst to me, I didn't, I was a kid. I was getting to do something with my dad, but it was just to appease the day.
Right.
And so, you grow up like that and you have those conversations. And so we had to have a real conversation about that. And it's probably one of the toughest conversations I had because I was the kid talking to the parent again. And that for me has been the probably the hardest thing, is having to have those conversations as the from the kid's perspective to the parent. And at that time, I hadn't come to terms with that. They weren't the superhero, they weren't the all-knowing. I still thought that they should known all this. And again, like I said, it took till about this past year, to realize it was their first time to be a parent. This is the first time they've navigated this. And so I think about it as I'm raising my kids. I'm like, man, there's things that I do that I it's probably going to cause some kind of mental thought process with them, and I need to do better with it, or I need to do this. And so every year I'm trying to make myself a little bit better. And again, follow that mantra: be who you needed or who you wanted to be. And so I feel
Right.
like I'm a really good father, but I know what I know about myself, that if could this be better? Could I do better? Could I show them better here? So I have that conscious effort. But on the flip side of that, I've learned that my parents weren't perfect, and my parents weren't all knowing. My parents were just trying to survive at times. And so I have to be okay with that. And that's been the most healing thing for me. And I've said it a couple times while we've talked for this last 45 minutes, is that getting to that point, because that's probably been the aha moment that clicked for me, was when I look at it as a parent for myself, and then I put them in their perspective, and that's been the pull away. But yeah, that was so that kind of tells you how that went. And my mom, we were frenemies. I'd say friendly after that conversation with him, because it put the blame where it should have been. I mean, she should have had the conversation with him. Should have been put to me, but it also it put a little bit of a wedge there. Now it's better now, but it's she didn't know how to act towards me afterwards, and I didn't know how to act to her. We're just still
Yeah.
we were trying to navigate that. That's been 6 years now. We're good now, but that was a long wedge.
I can imagine. And it's normal for people in general, and especially as the older you get, to not like change
Yeah,
and disruption, right? People don't like disruption. We like disruption because we're entrepreneurs. That's the
yeah,
only way we do what we do. But
yeah.
in a day-to-day life, especially family, disruption can create a lot of stress.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm
you
gonna
know,
I'll stop there. There's
yeah,
I'll add on to that real quick. There's a saying that I've kind of went through with, because me and my wife went through about a year's worth of therapy, and I don't think men talk about going to therapy in a positive light enough. And we did couples therapy, and it was really advantageous to us because there was just a few little things that we had blinders onto, um, and that were triggered by the way we were raised. Or we talk about trauma, and and this is what your show is based on. And so everybody talks about the 5 love languages, right? How I receive love, how I give love. But
right.
I'd like to flip that on its side and say there's a trauma language, because we all have a certain traumas and certain ways and thought processes, and there's a language to understanding that. So maybe that's the things your I was going to say your triggers, and that's what you have to work around. But we so focus as humans on love language, the 5 love languages of love. This is what I'm going to do. I need to give. I need to be told I'm pretty. I need to be shown I'm pretty. Whatever that may be. But if you really understand somebody's trauma, you can really navigate their triggers pretty well, or understand, hey, this is a heightened sense for him. And I have come to, over the last few years, find that, hey, if I care about you as a friend and you step on that boundary or that trigger for me, I let you know. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's been really rough because it embarrasses guys, especially when it's guy to guy. Like, hey,
Yeah.
you did this and I don't appreciate that. Well, it's not that big a deal. I understand, but it's a trigger for me. And I care about you as a friend, but I want to make sure that doesn't happen again, because I don't settle for that. And I know it's not your fault. It wasn't purpose. You were doing it out of fun, or you were doing it as a joke, or you were doing it, you didn't realize, but I need to have that conversation, because that's not something that sits well with me. And so it's taking a lot
You're
of
a much
time.
nicer friend than I am, Justin. You're a much more patient friend than I am. I'd be
Well,
like, yo,
but I
you do
mean,
that. You do that again. You do that again. We're gonna have some beef.
yeah, we're going to have some issues. But if it's truly somebody you want to see a long-term friendship with, and you say that, you're like, hey, I care about you and I want to be here with you. And sometimes it doesn't, like, I'm saying it calmly now because I'm not in the heat of the moment, but someone
Right.
says, hey, you look like fucking Steve Urkel. And I'm like, I hate when people talk about me, you piece of shit. And
Yeah.
then I have to
Yeah.
dial it back, because, it's not always perfect like that, but that's the mindset behind the hey, stop point right here. Like, hey, I'm hitting this button. Like, that's not okay with me. So
Right. Right. Well, and I love that you brought up. I love that you brought up that you did therapy, couples therapy with your wife, and I want to share something as well. It's and same topic here. You're right. Everyone always talks about the love languages, but we can go so much deeper and communicate on a much more spiritual path and a much more interpersonal from perspective when we understand each other's traumas. And
yeah.
so, for an example, my wife is the middle child.
Yep.
Her
Middle child.
father, yeah, middle child. Her father went to prison when they were young, so they didn't grow up with him very much. They had a single mother who worked all the time with three crazy kids. And
Mhm.
so my wife's trauma was whenever she was being rambunctious or loud, they would put her in a room
Okay.
and she would just scream.
Oh,
So her trauma as an adult is don't ever make me feel like you're ignoring me or
mhm.
silencing me
Mhm.
or that I'm not being heard. That's a
Yeah.
trauma for her.
Yeah.
And I used to do that because my trauma response was to shut down.
Hmm.
So what happens? You bring someone whose trauma is don't shut me out, and then you have someone. I was not bullied, but I had body issues when I was a kid, so people would call me fat and this and that. So I always kind of grew up like, oh well, if they do that, I'm just going to shut down and just go within
Yeah.
myself. So when we first got together in our relationship, you're going through the honeymoon phase, but then shit gets real because well now you're a real couple,
Hmm.
and we'd get into an argument or something would come up. She would get explosive, which was just her way of expressing her emotions,
Hmm.
and I would shut down.
Yep.
So it created tension and miscommunication. And you've been married or you are married.
Hmm.
You have to have communication in a relationship to
Hmm.
make it work. Love isn't enough. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I think you make a great point that understanding each other's trauma responses, whether it's in a relationship or in a friendship, is incredibly important.
Hmm.
And when understood, can create a longer, more powerful, and closer relationship as well.
Yeah. No, agreed. Agreed. That
Yeah.
it's like you met me and my wife. I'm like your wife, and you're probably more like my wife. She doesn't respond quick, and I'm like, if we're in it, like I'm there. I'm ready. Like I need a response now. Don't ignore me. Don't just not say anything.
Yeah.
A no response is a big response to me, and I'm like, and so
Right.
now I've said if you can't think of everything, just say, hey, give me a moment. Let me process it.
Right.
So I know you heard
Mhm.
me because I want to be heard. Like I'm important now. I feel important. And so that trauma response where I used to shut down, I took a stance in like I know who I am and I'm okay with who I am. So now I want to be heard and I don't want to be shut out. And like if we're having a conversation, you truly care about me, you need to be able to respond to me. You should trust me enough. And so it's funny that my trauma responses early were shutting down, like sitting in my room playing with Hot Wheels, and I played with Hot Wheels till I was probably 18, just because I was out of the way, nobody could bother me, and I could dream of whatever I wanted to dream about right there. And
Mhm.
so you see the movies where they go to a psych ward and the person's playing with the cars and they're like that, and that was, and I look back at it now, and that was my way to uh, disassociate with the world. Like it was like my
Mhm.
room, nobody was in there. I had a little car strip, and I would just sit there. And it sounds crazy to think about it that way, and it's in as a disassociation, but it was my way to disconnect. And life wasn't real at that point. It was I could be whatever I want to, and I see that with my kids now too. Their imaginations run wild, and I was like, it's normal for a 5 year old or a 7 or 8 or 10 year old, but is it normal for an 18 year old to do that? And
Mhm.
looking back, that was my trauma. That was the way I responded to it. And we talk about the word trauma, and so many people think such this like just harrowing, like this big thing that happened. And sometimes it's just subsequent events that just continually happen. And it's small stuff that you don't really think about. And so we think the word trauma, we think, big car wreck or big loss. And yes, that is by 100%. That is by definition. But we use the word trauma and people negate the fact that, hey, this might have been something that built on for a long time, being the middle child, being
Mhm.
put to your room, that was your punishment. And it created this response that you have. And you have to be able to have those conversations to understand what that thought process is.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you make a great point. So a couple other things I want to touch on as we kind of come up to time here, Justin. And
Yeah.
there's some key words that come up a lot in conversations and when you learn more about people's traumas. And I think it's a commonality, and that is self-worth and
Mhm.
identity or lack thereof. So I'm
Yeah.
interested to learn a little bit more from your perspective because you kind of carried, it sounds like this, it's a trauma of not knowing and disassociation and self-soothing as a child, not really knowing where you're coming from, so to speak. And then really playing out into adulthood, but then even continuing on after finding that initial answer, if you will. So how do you feel like your own self-worth and you being able to truly feel like I am one with my identity and knowing who I am as a man, as a father, as a husband, just as a presence and individual soul on this earth. How do you feel like that shifted over the years, and where would you say you are now?
So I'll say I was really lucky that my some of my family members just they really talked positively into me as a kid. And so like my
Mm.
grandma always told me I was different, and it sounds like you hear that like, oh, you're different, you're smarter. But I also had an older cousin that was always like that too. He goes, I don't get it. You get things. You see things differently. So I always had that positive self image of myself. Like, we always go through like, I'm gangly. I got acne. Maybe I'm not ripped enough. I'm not big enough. And so you have those self thoughts, but I was lucky. I had people always speaking positively into me. Like even, my mom and my dad, like, well, you don't ever see you crack a book and you make straight A's, and I was really, I really believed that I could do anything. And so I didn't have a doubt of self worth, and my identity. I didn't know who my biological father was, but I knew who I was as a person. I knew that I could look myself in the mirror every day and do the right things and live that way. Now that doesn't mean I haven't been perfect. Like have you tried this or done that? There are things that we do, but you do something wrong and you have guilt about it or remorse. Then you know that was it's real to you, so just not to do it again, or you try to get better. And so for identity and self worth, for me, I didn't struggle with that other than knowing who that person was on the other side of um, the birth certificate. But going farther than that, there were moments of questioning of like, am I this way because he's that way? Or am I this way because I didn't have him? And so if you want to be liked and you want to be seen and you go into the corporate world and you just want your boss to like you and you do everything and then you keep climbing the ladder and you get that positive reward. And so I tell people that when I worked for the railroad, I sold my soul because I was working 100 hours a week. I never missed a call. And I was afforded a life that I did never know I could have because of how we grew up, and so, success to me at 16 was to have a brick house, have a house that actually had a foundation. That was success. And when you're 22 and you buy that, you're like, oh man, I made it. And that's what my stepdad told me when I got the job at the railroad. He's like, you made it, son. You're gonna have a good retirement. And I'm like, 20 at 22, I've got 38 years till I can retire. I'm like, this cannot be it. And so, but I want people to like me, so I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to do the right things and I'm going to get promoted and I'm going to get promoted. And then so you're on track to be one of the youngest executives they've ever had at this company. And then my wife, she says, hey, I don't want to move again. We've moved 7 times in 8 years. And I get recruited by another company, become executive there. And I'm like 35 and there's only one more spot I can go up at this other company. And then I get let go and my identity's gone. And I built this identity because I think you can build your identity how you want to. You can be whom you want. And so I do that and it's wiped out and I'm sitting there and my ego's just hurt because this is who I'm supposed to be. My identity's gone because I was this railroad exec and now it's not that. And I had to transition. And maybe that's why in the land niche, I've done so well because I want to be the best land guy. I want to be the one that helps everybody. I want to be Uncle Justin to the other land investors and be that guy for them that they call when they just need a little help. It's not that they want me to build their business. It's just like, hey man, I've got this problem. Can you give me a little tweak here? And I do that. And so that's my identity and self-worth now. And there's days where I go, man, I just pivoted, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's who. Well, Uncle Justin, I've got a land question that I'm gonna hit you with
Okay.
on the sidebar.
Yeah. Send it
But
to
no,
me.
that's really great. Yeah, and then so kind of segueing into there, I read somewhere once, and I'm a big believer that some of the best entrepreneurs are the ones who have gone through trauma in life and have
Yeah.
been able to really confront that trauma, learn from it, evolve from it, grow from it, and really kind of put those lessons back into what they do in life. So, how would you, or what would you say you've taken from the experiences of growing up from little Justin to where you are now, and how that's actually played a part in your success as an entrepreneur?
Man, I think so. I'm gonna go a different way than you probably think on this question because
Yeah.
I live in the mindset of energy shift. The pendulum always swings back and forth, and so I look at my successes now because it's my time to shine. Because it was my youth, I didn't have the opportunity there. So they tell you, when success is what luck meets opportunity or preparedness meets opportunity. And so for my whole life, that my younger life, I was struggling. I didn't have everything. I wanted things. I was willing to work for. I was willing to do whatever it took to do that. But you're in the black side of the yin and yang. And so now, as it swings back to the white side, I'm willing to put the work in and willing to do it. So there's a piece to that comes from it. And so I'd say life was tough for the first half. Life's going to be really good the second half. And I've always lived with that mindset of it's it's always going to be better. Like there's always a good day and a bad day. It's the yin and yang. It's the ebb and the flow. And maybe that's looking at Taoism or looking at Buddhism or looking at the Eastern cultures and thinking that the energy's there, it's always going to be positive. So if I can keep my energy up, I'm going to attract the upper energy. And so living in that mindset because, hey, it's going to be better. This ain't that bad. I can get through this. That's what you need as an entrepreneur because of the ebbs and flows that go through it. You have to be able to look at your worst day and go, it'll be better tomorrow. Put your head down and keep working. And that's what I think helps me as an entrepreneur because I know what shitty looks like. A title company not finding the shit right or losing a deal, whatever that. It's going to get better tomorrow. Just keep my head down, keep doing what I know I need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Nietzsche who said, "This too shall pass."
Yeah.
And yeah, it's funny. That was my study this morning is this too shall pass. Like leveraging failures into greater successes because I see such a correlation there between failures in business and going through some really hard shit in life. Yeah. And the same way that, what you've experienced has allowed you to realize that, if we can just have lower lows and higher highs and really balance things out, that at the end of the day, nothing's that bad and nothing is impossible to get out of.
Yeah.
I remind myself of that, or especially in the last several years, is like I've been through some shit. I've been in a dark place. I've wanted to be gone. I begged to be taken away. I wanted to drown myself. I asked someone to waterboard me. It was sick. But I needed to feel that and be reminded that there's a lot to be grateful for as well.
Yeah.
A lot to be grateful for in this life. And I think, when we get into those dark holes in life, which we all do, it's important that we have perspective. We remember that there's a lot of beauty out there as well. And always remember that there's people in this life that depend on us, that love us, and that are going to support us no matter what. And if we can lean on that energy and lean on that love, well, then nothing is ever going to be that bad where we're in just despair for a long time. So I'm a big believer, Justin, and be a champion for yourself. Yep. Always show up for yourself and never quit. Yep. Have a bad day, have an off day, get upset. Maybe your energy goes in a way that you typically don't want it to go in. But, when all is said and done, be a champion for yourself, never give up, and just keep pushing forward. And you've definitely been an example of that, man. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, man, I'm happy I got to. A little bit different than the normal podcast I'm on, but I'm glad they got to say that, and I hope that it impacts at least one person of your listeners. And
no doubt, it's impacted me. So if we're looking to impact just one person, we've won already, bro. A couple questions for you, just to have some fun, real quick. So lightning round of questions. It's going to be a little bit off topic, but it'll give people some more insight into your head. So let's get off. Let's go one word, so that way we don't think. All right. Okay. So what's one word that you would attribute to success in life?
Moving forward, like continue to move.
Keep moving. Perfect. Yep. Favorite food, Justin?
Lasagna.
I like lasagna. What's one book you could keep reading? If you could only choose one book to read for the rest of your life, what book would that be?
Oh man, I read Die with Zero, and that one really had an impact on me 2 years ago, and so I'd like to read that one again. Nice.
Okay, cool. One country that you haven't been but really want to go.
One country I haven't been. So my wife's doing the Asian tour, so I'm really jealous of her right now. And I'd love to see like some of the Thailand or Philippines beaches, like some of the areas down there, some of those beaches, and see that.
Yeah, they're nice, man. Thailand, Philippines. I've been to both. They're beautiful.
Okay.
One person that you would have dinner with if you could.
One person I could have dinner with. Oh man, that's a good one. Let me think on that real quick. Oh, I'd say my grandfather.
Grandfather, I like that, man.
Yeah, he passed away when I was in second grade, and so I'd like to talk to him as an adult.
I love that, man. I love that. Your favorite sports team?
I'm gonna have to say the Rangers, just because I'm a Fort Worth kid, and we do our live events there.
That's true. Yeah. I did meet you there, and they won. They won the series, the World Series.
Yep.
Good. I thought you were gonna say the Cowboys, and I was just gonna feel bad for you in the moment.
No.
And then last question, brother. If you could tell young Justin one thing, knowing what you know now, what would it be?
Keep moving forward, bud. You're doing the right things.
I love it. Justin, let the audience know where they can find you, so they can follow you, learn a little bit more about your programs and your courses, and just give yourself a plug, brother.
Yeah, Casual Fridays, REI is our podcast name. It's on every Friday. It's a 15, 20-minute podcast. You can find me on Instagram, J_J_Sliva, SLIVA. Facebook, those aren't like guru sites. Those are my personal ones. So you see a day in the life of me. It's not designed to push a course to you or anything. You want to follow the Casual Fridays Instagram or Facebook, they're there. Casual Fridays REI. But again, you get an insight to my personal life on the personal pages.
Love it, brother. Look, it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you for having the courage to share everything you did. It's not easy,
Yeah.
and you've been an amazing example for anyone listening to this and for me as well. So thank you again, and I'll catch you on the next one, bro.
Yes, sir. Oscar, thank you.
Thank you.